Hi guys, I'm Fieke. I'm going to present you my research in progress paper, so the results are not in yet. I'm writing this paper together with my two co-authors, Rachelle and Laury. They're also present today, so hi there, digital wave from here. I'm going to get you through the research in progress paper, but first I would like to tell you a little bit about myself. I have an academic background in psychology and in data science, and I just started my PhD trajectory. So this is part of a bigger PhD study, which means that it's not finished yet. If you do like to contact me or get my phone number, or whatever, just scan the QR code and it will link you to my LinkedIn page. What I'm going to tell you about is first a little bit of the introduction of the topic of my PhD, and then I will get you through the literature analysis, which ends in a conceptual model. I will talk about the proposed research method in order to validate this conceptual model, and I will tell you a bit more about our current stage. First of all, the main topic of my PhD studies is high growth firms, HGFs. And if we talk about high growth firms, it's quite hard to actually get to a very clear definition. So I chose to use the one of the OECD, which says that a firm is a high growth firm if they realize an annual growth of 20% for over at least 3 years, and they start a business with at least 10 employees. So for now, that's the definition I'm going to use when I'm talking about HGFs. And the relevance of high growth firms is quite large, as Henriksen and Johansson state that they are actually the main contributors of job creation all over the world. So there's a lot of attention for high growth firms in the academic world, especially because they are the main job contributors. And there's a lot of current research on high growth firms I was studying before. A lot of people have looked at the antecedents of high growth within a firm or have been looking at the growth process. But the problem is that, first of all, academic students have quite difficulties on defining high growth firms. For example, some of the papers look at growth in sales, others look at growth in a number of employees or in revenue. So there's not a lot of consensus on the definition of high growth. Another problem within the current research is that some of the scholars look at high growth as something that happens in different growth cycles. So it starts and it ends. Others look at growth as a more as a kind of a process that you go as an organization through different kind of phases. And this makes it quite difficult to compare results about high growth because we don't have like a very clear understanding of the process of high growth. And current research is very, very fragmented. So it makes it difficult to actually get a grip on what is high growth and how is it actually, what are the antecedents and how can we kind of understand the process. So this is the research gap that I found in the current literature. And as different researchers have stated before, there's a need for a more holistic approach that suits the dynamics of the high growth process and looks at high growth from a process-oriented view. So that's the problem that was stated before. One way to look at a more relational concept of high growth is to look at the role of knowledge. Like knowledge is seen as a source, as an asset in the main literature about high growth. But there are some researchers that actually state that you can't see knowledge as an asset because it's not something that you can just have or don't have. It's more of a capability on how you use knowledge in order to succeed as an organization. Where do you get knowledge from? So the absorptive capacity looks at knowledge more from a relational construct that is bound by social interactions, and looks at not only just knowledge as an asset, but actually at the application of knowledge and acquisition of knowledge all together as a more of a capability of a firm. So looking at high growth from the absorptive capacity theory actually enables us to look at high growth more from a process-orientated view. Another concept that got a lot of attention in the high growth firm literature is the role of social networks, because a lot of researchers found out that social networks can actually make up for a lack of resources. So if an organization wants to grow, but it has no finance, for example, they can actually make use of their social networks in order to get the finance needed to grow. And again, social networks and social interactions are not just an asset. They also have to be looked from a relational perspective. So that in combination with knowledge gives us an opportunity to look at high growth from a holistic approach. And that's the thing that's lacking in the current research. Indeed, the social capital theory that talks about these social networks actually has a linkage with absorptive capacity theory as well, as it is expected that social capital not only influences growth itself, but also has a direct link to the facilitation of absorptive capacity, and that absorptive capacity then actually improves growth factors within an organization. So getting those two theories together in the context of high growth actually gets to the next research question for my PhD studies. And it is about how does social capital facilitate absorptive capacity in a high growth environment. Well, in order to get a bit more of a grip on these themes, I started the literature analysis based on the principles of the grounded theory of Wolfswinkel. It's an iterative approach where I actually started looking at literature on the main themes using the and or operators, and I used the database EBSCO and Web of Science as a source. And just to get a start on these main concepts, I didn't use any time frame restrictions because I wanted to be sure that I actually included the original theory papers from the people that talked about social capital and absorptive capacity. And by doing this, I ended up with 16 core articles, which I coded based on the ground theory as well, starting with open coding and then ending with selective coding. So I want to show you the results of this first literature study. The literature study, first of all, I read a lot about the challenges that high growth firms face during phases of high growth. And according to Phelps and al., every organization that faces a phase of high growth actually has to overcome specific challenges. They call it 6 tipping points, and they're based around people management, strategic orientation, obtaining finance. I was talking about that before, but also formalized systems and 2 more. And they're actually found out that in order to overcome these challenges that organizations face during phases of high growth, they have to change the structure and the contextual, the context of the organizations itself. In order to do that, absorptive capacity might help, as the application of knowledge might help organizations to overcome these challenges. So the absorptive capacity theory they make a distinction between 2 types of capacity. First of all, you have the potential absorptive capacity of an organization, which is the actual acquisition of knowledge and then assimilation of knowledge in order to fit it to the knowledge that you already have. And the second type of absorptive capacity is the realized absorptive capacity, which is more about transforming the information into something valuable and then exploiting it in order to reach your success as an organization. Looking at social capital, that is also a very important theme within high growth literature, as I was talking about before, especially because it can compensate for the lack of resources that smaller organizations might face. And social capital is divided in 3 dimensions. The first one, structural dimension, is about the network itself, for example, the size and the actors that are inside the social networks. The cognitive dimension is more about the shared languages that actors have within the networks, for example, the language, but also the norms and the values that they share. And the relational dimension is more about the type of relations that people have within a network. And together, the social capital itself is the sum of the actual, but also the potential embedded sources that are embedded within this social network, and they might be very valuable. Next to the relational dimension, there's also a distinction between bonding and bridging ties. It is an example of different types of social networks, where bonding ties are more based around the homogeneity of people. So when you're having a bonding tie with somebody, it's based around being the same, having the same background. And the bridging ties are more about ties between people that do have different socioeconomical backgrounds. So that's a bit about social capital. And the literature states that social capital might influence high growth in firms, but when firms go through different stages or different phases of high growth, they also ask for differences within their social capital. So based on the different challenges that firms face, the social capital needs to be changed or is changing according to the different needs of an organization. So it is quite a dynamic concept as well. When we connect the dots, as I was telling you before, social capital and absorptive capacity don't only interact with high growth itself, but there's also studies that state that social capital only influences high growth through absorptive capacity. For example, internal and external networks of firms, they actually do influence high growth within a firm, but only through the acquisition or the transformation of knowledge. So it is the combination of the two that actually makes firms grow even better. And all this information is here. I have to go to the other side. All the information here is also summarized into the conceptual model, where you can see the linkage between social capital and high growth, as I was talking about before, but also the linkage between social capital and potential and realized absorptive capacity and high growth itself. So these are the different linkages that I want to do, I want to validate in the context of an organization. And I'll be doing that by using a mixed method, as mixed methods is the best approach to look at different complex phenomena in the real world. So the research method consists of 3 stages. I'm first going to extend the current literature review in order to get a better grip on this conceptual model. I'm going to do that based on the grounded theory again of Wolfswinkel, which actually provides me with a bit of structure in analyzing the literature. And it's going to end up in a proposed conceptual model, which is going to be a bit more based on the literature as the one that I was showing before. The models are especially valuable when you want to provide a link between a theory and the real world. So this is going to help me to search or to answer the research question that I stated before. And after this, I'm sorry?
2 minutes, Fieke.
Yes, I'm going for it. After that, I'm going to validate the conceptual model in the real world by doing a qualitative multiple case study consisting of 2 organizations that are actually competitors of each other and have clear growth ambitions and also experienced very different stages of high growth before. And it's going to be a combination of document analysis and semi-structured interviews. And I want to add a quantitative study as well based on the outcomes of the first 2 stages. So it's not quite sure what the quantitative study is going to look like, but it will probably be a complementary survey based on the previous research propositions. So this is a summary of the 3 research methods stages that I was talking about. And I hope to end up with an academic contribution to other students to provide an example on how you can look at relational concepts and difficult, complex phenomena by using 2 theories and putting them into a conceptual model. Now, of course, I want to provide some more insights on the process of growth, which goes further than just analyzing antecedents, but actually providing a bit of a more framework or conceptual model. And I hope to find those, I hope to find a way for organizations to realize their growth ambitions by looking at their social networks and the knowledge that they have within those social networks, so they are not very dependent on external finance anymore. So this is quite my ambition. And for now, I'm actually in the selective coding phase of the extended literature review. So there's a lot of more results to come. And as Lorna was telling, coding can be quite, can take quite some time. So I'm in the middle of that, but I'm looking forward to to the results. So for now, that was, I think, the presentation. Any questions?